Thank you very much. Again, welcome everyone. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Justin Jackson. I'm the program manager, and I'll be doing most of the talking today. But before I get into talking, you'll have a brief introduction from Sam Filer, our executive director. And then I'll go into what is sustainable wine growing, what is the certification, why you'd want to certify your vineyard, how to get certified. And then you'll get a break from me, and we'll go over to Tim Martinson, who will talk about the audit process. He was one of our independent inspectors last year, and he will be again this year. And so he can maybe give you a little bit better picture on how that'll go. So, Sam?
Great. Thanks, Justin. The sustainability program is a top priority for the foundation. Our board of directors affirmed this during their strategic planning session in 2018. And then just this past summer remains a priority of the organization. And the reason is it's really a business imperative that we offer this program. You may be aware that consumer preferences are changing. We are engaged in an export program into Western Europe, and a lot of Western European consumers are asking about the provenance of their wines and where the grapes come from and how the grapes are grown and handled. And so it's not just a nice thing to have, it's really the future of the wine industry. And it's important that we provide this program to our grape growers in the state. And so wineries are then able to promote sustainably produced wines. This is not an old effort for New York State. Tim was part of a group that created Vine Balance, which was released in 2007, and then it was subsequently taken on by the Long Island Sustainable Wine Growing Association, which created a standard specifically for Long Island. So we're really building off 15 years of really quality work to create a sustainability standard and protocol in New York State. We were successful in securing a grant from USDA 2 years ago to launch a pilot program this past spring, and that continues through this year. We're also receiving support from the Genesee Valley Regional Market Authority to promote the sustainability program in the Finger Lakes. So, from a funding perspective, it's a priority for a lot of groups, and we have another USDA grant through their Partnerships for Climate Smart Commodities program that was announced earlier this year. It's also imperative from a public policy perspective. The state of New York passed its Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act in 2019, which sets some really aggressive goals for addressing climate change in New York State. And that plan really views agriculture as an important actor in reducing greenhouse gas emissions and to promote carbon sequestration. So again, this is a business imperative, it's a public policy imperative, it's the future, and it's important that we provide this program to the industry here in New York. So what's involved in the program? One is education, and not to continue pontificating, but part of the reason why this effort got reignited here in New York is we were invited to participate in a specialty crop block grant with the California Sustainable Wine Association. And they hosted a conference in California in 2019. And then they did one digitally in 2020. And they're planning to do conferences again. So there's national forums that we're able to provide access to on sustainable grape growing practices in the United States. And you'll probably see more from Justin that there'll be webinars hosted throughout the year that will help you get in touch with the most up-to-date and cutting-edge practices for promoting sustainable viticulture practices. Then I think the meat of the program is really Vine Balance and the independent inspection. So Vine Balance is a self-guided workbook that you can use to evaluate your viticulture management practices, your business, your sustainability business practices. Justin will talk more about all the elements of Vine Balance, but that's the meat of the program. And then again, we were successful in securing another USDA grant to develop a trust mark and some basic marketing tools. And we're going to continue to invest in those because, as Justin will talk about, There is some market research out there that shows at least Gen Z and millennials are inclined to purchase or pay more for sustainably produced wine. The key is being able to, how do we position these wines in a wine retail shop, a restaurant, and even within your tasting rooms, so we're communicating to the right audiences and compelling them to make those purchases. So that's the basics of the program. We're really excited about it. Thank you for participating today. And Justin, I turn it back over to you.
Thanks. We'll just jump right into it then. I think you did a great job covering the broad bases. But first up, want to answer the question, what even is sustainable wine growing? We hear sustainable thrown around a lot in a lot of different industries. But for sustainable wine growing, we view it as three main pillars: environmentally sound practices, socially equitable practices, and economic feasibility. So it'd be great if we had very environmentally stringent regulations and very, socially equitable, stringent regulations, but we got to make sure that both of these allow vineyards to be economically feasible, to keep their doors open and keep running. So we want to combine all three together and make sure that we're doing the best we can for our communities, our employees, the environment in and around in our vineyard, and for ourselves and keeping the vineyards running, and for our families. So we've broken this down into 9 main objectives, and these are also mirrored as the 9 objectives in Vine Balance. So most of them are pretty self-explanatory: input reduction, soil health, water protection, energy conservation, resource waste, ecosystem health, climate resiliency, continuous improvement, and social equity. I want to touch on continuous improvement because that one's kind of the odd man out, but we really do view sustainability not as fill out the workbook, get the certification, put your little trust mark on the bottle or on your vineyard labeling and move on, but kind of as self-evaluation and seeing how we as a community can always improve, see how as a vineyard we can improve for the environment and for each other and for ourselves by doing more economically sustainable practices as well. So why get certified under the New York Sustainable Wine Growing Certification? First and foremost, like I was just talking about, is recognition. We want to have vineyards recognized for their good practices. If they are already doing good for their environment, putting in that extra effort to preserve their land and the land around them, they're doing good for their communities, and they're doing it in a fiscally responsible method. We want to demonstrate that to the consumers. We want to let them know and be like, hey, this is a good company. They're doing right. They deserve your money. We translate this over into the wine by giving trust marks and labeling to wineries and bottles of wine made with 85% certified grape labels. And so this is great for getting it directly into the consumer. They see it on the marketing shelf and they think, hey, this is great. Maybe I'll pay more. Maybe I'll be more likely to pick this up. And lastly, as Sam was talking about, the demand globally for sustainable products is going up. And so by being certified, we're recognizing you, but it's also putting you in contact with this greater global community of restaurants that are more likely to recommend your wine, or people who are more likely to recommend your wine to others or pick it up off the shelf because they've been marketed by other sustainability certifications and they see our certification of sustainability and they're like, hey, that wine's made reputably. I want to give my dollars to that company. The second aspect is standards. The certification would really mean nothing if we didn't back it up with any sort of standards or regulation. As Sam talked about, we are fundamentally based off the Vine Balance workbook, which was brought about in 2007, but it's been heavily updated and revamped to reflect modern practices and to be expanded outside of the vineyard, right? Touching on the community and touching on economic sustainability. So this workbook is kind of the cornerstone of the project. It was put together through review under a technical committee, which is made up of local academics as well as experts in the viticultural field. in New York. And to make sure that this workbook is, again, up to date with the best practices, we have it yearly reviewed by the technical committee. So our standards scientifically are very up to date. Also, our standards are commensurate with other national certifications, such as the California Sustainable Wine Alliance, Lodi Rules, and Live. So we're making sure we're able to be competitive with the other top dogs of certification of sustainability, right? So when someone sees our label, they're not thinking we're greenwashing, they don't think that we're lesser or we're just a marketing. Our standards really reflect good sustainable practices, and the consumer will be able to trust that. And since we're such a new certification, we're going to have to change. So our standards are ever evolving. They're not necessarily set in stone, and we understand that. And we want to keep up with the times. We want to keep up with the new sciences and changing perceptions to make sure that our certification is the best at representing sustainable practices. And lastly, the integrity of the standards and the certification are upheld through a third-party audit. Again, the standards mean nothing because anyone can say whatever they want if we didn't have a third-party audit. And so that would be people like Tim Martinson, who goes out and makes sure what you filled out on Vine Balance, what you said you're doing, is actually true. And again, this is all to build trust in our program for the consumer so we can reflect the wineries who are actually doing good sustainable practices. This carries over into the winery. We do chain of custody audits to ensure that any winery wanting to label their bottle of wine with our trust mark or as certified sustainable or made with certified sustainable grapes is actually abiding by our rules and making wine with certified grapes. And lastly, we want to make sure that we're policing ourselves and maintaining the integrity of our organization. And as such, we participate in an international standard organization known as the Sustainable Wine Roundtable, which is made up of all different sustainability certifications throughout the globe. And they work together to kind of make sure that we, as standards, uphold a minimum level of sustainability, and that, again, we're not responsible for greenwashing, and we can kind of police ourselves and make sure that the consumer knows what they're getting. So now that you know what our program's about, why would you want to certify your vineyard in particular? First and foremost, as I talked about before, self-improvement. Sitting down and actually doing Vine Balance and taking the time to plan can really help to identify new ways to improve. I know we all get busy with life, and so it's not every day that you're kind of forced to take a step back and reevaluate your procedures and your management kind of style, but this gives you an opportunity to do that. And when going through Vine Balance, you can maybe learn about certain sustainable practices you didn't know about, or figure out that, oh, hey, I'm maybe not doing something as sustainable as I possibly could. Or perhaps you can identify cost-saving opportunities, like maybe I'm putting out a little bit too much fertilizer. I didn't realize that. Or maybe I'm spraying too much. I wasn't sure about that. Perhaps I can cut back, be more sustainable, but also perhaps save some money. So really, the self-assessment and the continuous improvement is very important for us and is a great opportunity that participating in this program allows you to do. But coming down to it, the big incentive is monetary. There's huge demand for sustainable wine, and hopefully that's reflected in your bottom dollar when you move more of your grapes, more of your wine, and hopefully get paid more for it. So here we have a little graphic of a survey done by Wine Opinions of their national trade panel back in 2016. And so trade just means wholesale, retail, restaurants, media, not individual buyers. And they're asking how important is sustainable practice or like sustainably labeled wine in recommending or choosing a wine. As you can see, 52% it was occasionally important, 21% this was their main factor in recommending a wine. They frequently did it, 24% rarely, and 4% never. And so while it's not overwhelmingly positive, it definitely is more than none in terms of the trade. And this was done back in 2016. So we can only imagine that as the climate of the world and just culture has been changing, that more and more people will be taking into consideration sustainably made wine in terms of recommendations. Now, the interesting one is when we look at consumer willingness to pay, and we can see that from this survey done in 2019 of 2,000 US regular wine drinkers done by Wine Intelligence, that on average, respondents would be willing to pay $3 more for sustainably produced wine, which is quite astounding if you ask me. And if you look at the chart, you can clearly see that those willing to pay more are in the younger generation, such as millennials and Gen Z. And so the future of wine production and winemaking really is in the sustainability market if you want to be selling premium wine. As the Gen Z generation grows larger, more of them become drinking age, and as millennials and Gen Z have access to more and more wealth, they're more likely to spend on luxury goods such as sustainable wine. So our hope is that we can really market and sell this wine, and you will notice a return in the price you can get for your grapes and for your wine. So to that end, you can see right here is the Sustainability Trust Mark. This is kind of our marketing seal. You can definitely put it in different colors on your bottle or on your marketing, your signs, your neckers, whatever you will. And it'll be our kind of picture to the world to show, hey, these wines are certified, sustainable. They're made in New York. It's good for the environment, good for society, and it's good for themselves. We're not exploiting farmers. They're doing what's right for themselves. So we have labeling and marketing guidelines coming early next year that'll kind of clear up what claims you can and can't make about your wine or your grapes. But we will be providing certified vineyards with kind of like a toolkit that'll help them implement language and images into their already existing marketing to really, again, get recognized for their good practices. And again, wineries are also available to participate in this as long as they're making their wine with 85% certified grapes. So we're kind of hoping if people pay more for certified wine, then the wineries will in turn buy grapes for a higher price that are also certified. And then we'll be able to market this all throughout. But we're not just marketing through the trust mark. We've developed a whole marketing plan by the New York Wine and Grape Foundation. We contracted out to the Born Collective, who have developed messages and graphics through focus groups and surveys for B2B and B2C audiences. And so what that means is essentially vineyards to wineries and vineyards and wineries to the direct consumers. And through this marketing or through these surveys and these focus groups, they determined and developed taglines. So the first one is great wine doing good. And so for this, we're trying to convey that not only are we sustainable, we're doing good, but we're also making great wine. And that wine is doing good for the environment, for the community, and financially for the growers themselves. And then kind of the two supporting pillars under that are boldly uncompromising and boldly purposeful. So we're uncompromising in our values of maintaining the environment and our communities, and we're purposeful in that we're making wine with the intent of doing good, building an industry, and building a community around ourselves. All this to say is that once you're certified as a vineyard and or winery who is buying certified grapes, you're not on your own. You're backed by the full force of the New York Wine and Grape Foundation, and we already have a marketing plan in place to market these wines nationally and internationally. So how exactly do you get this certification? Not that hard. As we've talked about, it's mainly based on vine balance. So you're going to apply, which it's free. The whole certification is free at the moment. So free to apply, free to get audited. The only confusing part is that each vineyard requires its own certification. And now how do we define a vineyard? So predominantly it's a contiguous plot of land, right, with grapes grown on it. But to specify, a vineyard is something that has its own mixing loading station and its own tractors. So for instance, if you have one main vineyard and then maybe a mile or two down the road, you have a little 2-acre block of grapes, that will not need its own certification because it uses the same mixing and loading station, the same tractor. So you can get that all certified under one certification. However, if you do own like 2 vineyards and they're in different counties, you know, you're not sharing tractors between them. Each has its own independent equipment. Each has its own independent mixing and loading station. These will need their own independent certifications, because as the certification works now, it's by the vineyard, and we're only certifying the grapes grown in certified vineyards. So if you have any questions about this, definitely just feel free to reach out. I know it can be a bit confusing, but we can work it out and answer any questions you have. So for each vineyard you're trying to certify, you'll send in an application and you'll receive a Google Doc version of Vine Balance for you to fill out. And these Google documents are private. Only you and I will be able to see it, as well as the auditor when the time comes. So here's what the Google Doc of Vine Balance will look like. As you can see there at the top, we have 1, 2, 3, and 4. So 1 being the worst practice, 4 being the best practice. We have the objectives, which is water protection, so objective 3, and then we have items under it. And for each items, you'll go in and you'll read and you'll decide what score to give yourself. So for instance, 3.1.2, riparian buffers. Say you have waterways running through your vineyards and there's no vegetation up next to them. There's no buffer strips or ever. The runoff is frequent into them. You'll be scored a 1, which isn't great, but it's a score. And so you'll fill out the little 0, you just backspace it, enter in the number. And once you do that for the entire resource book, it'll automatically calculate your score at the end. Now, to pass Vine Balance and be eligible for certification, you need to maintain a score of 75% or 423 out of 564. Big numbers, it's a lot easier. I think once you get into Vine Balance and really start figuring it out, you'll realize you're probably already scoring 4s or 3s on a lot of these objectives without even putting in much effort to change what you're already doing. And so you can just fill this out. It'll auto-calculate your score for you. And once you complete this, should be completed before the beginning of the new year, then you are able to be audited next year and obtain your certification. A new thing that we've introduced this year that's different from the pilot program is action plans. So for instance, as I was talking about before, if you scored a 1 on the item of repairing buffers, you would need to fill out an action plan. And so this falls into the continuous improvement kind of category, but also we want to maintain a sort of minimum level of compliance with Vine Balance across the board, again, to ensure that our certification is meaningful and we're not greenwashing. So all scores of 1 need to be accompanied by an action plan of how you'll improve it. So for instance here, the objective would be waterways, the item ID number would be buffers, I would score of 1. And the action plan would be, I would bring in plant plants, cultivate a buffer zone around the waterways to ensure that we mitigate any sort of runoff into that stream or waterway. And the timeline would be next summer. It's fairly simple to do an action plan. The hard part would be following up on it and making sure you actually do it. So to ensure this is that scores of 1 are allowed on the first year of Vine Balance. However, by the time of your next in-person inspection, which is 3 years down the road, you need to have no scores of 1. They all must be raised to a minimum of a 2. And again, this is to ensure continuous improvement and sort of a minimum floor of compliance with Vine Balance. And these are due at the same time as Vine Balance. They're in the same booklet as Vine Balance. You just go to the tab in the Google Doc and fill it out. Very easy. So again, this is just to surmise how to get certified. You're going to apply for the program, separate one for each vineyard, complete the Vine Balance workbook and score at least 75%. And for all items that scored a 1, you're going to write up a little action plan about how you'll fix it within the next 3 years. And then lastly, you'll undergo an in-person audit that'll verify all the information you put into Vine Balance. And Tim Martinson will speak more about that after me and hopefully clear up any questions or confusions about that aspect of the program. To maintain certification after the first year, you will still involve participation. So every year, you'll need to update Vine Balance and update any action plans. And this is just to ensure that you're staying in compliance. make sure that you're working on those action plans and keeping up to date with any new program requirements, because as we said, the requirements and regulations may change as our program changes. Now, every third year, you will undergo an in-person audit again. And again, this is just to ensure that you're actually abiding by the rules of the certification at the time. And we didn't want to do it every year. We didn't want to do it every other year because these are time consuming. They can be taxing, and we understand that. So every third year, we're just going to come back in, check up on you, make sure you're doing good. Now, reminder, by the third year, you can have no scores of 1. We're going to get you in the door. We want to make sure everyone can apply and, get certified, but we want to see improvement, and we want to see a commitment to the sustainability program and make sure we're improvement. So if you're found to not be in compliance with any part of the sustainability program, we can revoke your right to use the trust mark or any sort of marketing equipment or, your certification. So it's best to stay in compliance as they change. So next steps for you personally, if you haven't already, go sign up. Even if you don't complete it, even if you think it's too tedious, there's no harm in signing up, looking over Vine Balance, filling it out, and seeing what score you can get. There's a certification guidebook, tons of resources to help you on your path. I'm here. Feel free to reach out with any questions or concerns at any time, and I'll help you along this pathway. So again, Vine Balance, though, is due before the end of the year if you want to get certified for the 2023 year. So do it now. It shouldn't take long to fill out. And then in-person audits will begin sometime in February and hopefully be finished up by May. As Sam talked about at the beginning, we do have more webinars coming up. So keep an eye out on our website. And if you haven't already, you can sign up to our newsletter to stay informed on factors and webinars and education opportunities as they come up. And with that, that's all for me. So I'll stop sharing my screen and I'll hand it over to Tim Martinson, who will run you through Vine Balance and the audit a little bit more. Thank you for your time.
Okay. All right, dead air here. Well, thank you, Justin. It's great to see the program that develop, and it's been a privilege for me to be associated with it as a vineyard inspection. It got me out talking to people for the first time since COVID, really, and I really enjoyed that. And I found out a lot of stuff I didn't know about what people do and the practices they use. For example, I was surprised to see the number of growers that, particularly with vinifera growers that don't apply any nitrogen at all. I saw several raptor posts and pollinator gardens and things that I hadn't paid much attention to. So it was really gratifying to have this experience and see different places aside from New York. So, and the other thing I wanted to mention is that it's great to see a lot of familiar names out there in the audience. So, so hi from me. So here's what I want to talk about today is just the process. I want to walk you through the nuts and bolts of it. And I want to start out by talking about the history of the workbook and development, because I've been involved in this since 1997, really. And then I want to go through the purpose of the inspection, what it's about. I want to go through how you should be prepared for the audit and the inspection, what I do to prepare for the audit, and then just the nuts and bolts of how it proceeds, and then what results, which is what we call the post-inspection report. So just starting with the history, just as I was getting going as the Finger Lakes grape specialist in 1997, the Keuka Lake Association had just published this big inventory of the Keuka Lake watershed that tried to really quantify all the major sources of things that are going around in the watershed that could affect the water quality in Keuka Lake, and with the idea of trying to do as many things from modifying septic systems along the lake to ag land erosion reduction, etc. They're trying to do quantify all this stuff and decide what to do to mitigate this. So one part of this was obviously the major vineyards in the Keuka Lake watershed. So what they didn't have was what they call ag environmental worksheets for grapes. So I was tasked with coming up with these and designing these. And this was really, sort of the predecessor of the AEM workbook. We worked closely with Peter Landry, who is a water quality specialist at the Yates County Cooperative Extension. Later on, he was the executive director. And then the Yates Soil and Water Conservation District, which was a really great partner in doing this. And we worked on this together. So that was the first thing. And we did that in 1997, 1998. So around 2005, I got approached by Tom Davenport of National Grape Cooperative, who said, well, here's a grant that you should apply for. And so we did apply to the Northeast Extension Risk Management Education Program to develop a sustainable practices workbook. Now, Welch's and National Grape Cooperative were very interested in this from the standpoint of marketing to some of their major customers, including Walmart. So this gave us funding to start doing some education. So you can see the vineyard notes from 2005. And then we formed a committee to develop the workbook. And you can see probably several familiar names there of people that were involved, both from the industry and from the Soil and Water Conservation District, Alice Wise and Tim Weigel from the different regional programs. So the result of this was published in 2007, as people have mentioned. And Alice Wise and I really joined forces on this to develop the workbook, along with Tim Weigel and Jamie Hawk, who worked with us on this project. So this was the first one, and now this has evolved into and been extensively revised, as Justin mentioned, several additional things beyond the vineyard and the emphasis that we had on water quality and drinking water. That has been expanded. Developed by Chris Serra, who is the director of the Oregon Live program, and then Whitney Beeman, Justin's predecessor, and then along with this grower advisory community. Okay, so in the 2007 workbook, it looked like what you see on the left, and in the revised online Google version, it looks like what you see on the right. And they're very similar and a lot of overlap between the two, but there's a big difference in that in our original workbook, the higher score was the worst. So you wanted to get a low score, whereas in the current vine balance, it's better to get more points. So the categories have been rearranged and kind of flipped. So that's the main difference between them in terms of how they're organized. So I want to get to what do we want to accomplish during the inspection visit, and first thing, and the most important, well, one of the most important is we want to review your record keeping. So we want you to have your records ready, and that's some of the things that we take a look at to verify that you actually have the records, whether it be for spray records or worker protection, standard training records or whatever it might be. And we'll go through a list of this later. So that's first. And then, to inspect the vineyard and the facilities layout. And a lot of this I do through maps, but also, have a pretty heavy emphasis on taking a look at your pesticide mixing and loading facilities, because those are, obviously quite variable. But also things like the topography and the headland distances and so forth. It's the opportunity to discuss practices. And so I think there's a tendency to view this as, well, I got to get a certain number of points. But what several people found in this process was that it was really a good place to discuss everything you're doing and, maybe get a few ideas and some directions for the future. It's not often that you get a chance as a grower to, since you do so much stuff, to take a step back and look at everything. And that's one of the things that the workbook and doing this process offers you. So it's an opportunity for me to educate, or you to educate me, and to clarify any questions you might have. So what do you need to do to prepare? Well, first of all, you got to complete the vine balance assessment. You got to go through the workbook, assign scores to yourself. And then the next thing is to make sure you gather your records. I did have a couple where this didn't quite happen for people, and that really makes things challenging when we're trying to look at fertility or pest management or spray records. Prepare a map. A lot of the stuff that I do involves looking at maps and looking at the layout of everything. And finally, we do have a pre-inspection checklist that we came up with, and it's here at the right that we'll distribute, but it just kind of reviews everything I'm talking about, and then a checklist of things that you need to have ready, and a description of this whole process that I'm going through here. Okay, so what do I do to prepare? Well, I go online and review your completed workbook. First of all, I look for your property and zoom in on Google Earth to see what the layout looks like. And on the right there, you can see there's a couple things you can do with Google Maps. The first one is you can draw what they call a shape file around the border of the vineyard to find out the acreage that way of each block. The other thing that I can do that's kind of relevant to this auditing process is I can put in a line there that will measure the distance from the vineyard to some of these sensitive areas like stream banks and concentrated flow areas. So that's the sort of things I review, and I'll have more to say on that in a moment. So then I print out the workbook and the map, and I make notes on it. And I do some of this during the process of the inspection. And then my other job is to actually schedule a time to come out. And hopefully, if I can do probably 2 of these a day. Generally, they've been taking about 2 hours. Some of them are stretched out to 3 hours if we get into some discussion. But in general, it sort of takes 2 hours sitting down and going through the workbooks to complete the inspection. Okay, what do we do in the inspection? This is starting to get repetitive, but number one is I'll review your records. I'll take a look at spray and fertility inputs, yield records if you have them, and pesticide use, scouting, etc. Then The next step is to inspect the facilities and equipment. Some of this I tend to do off the map, and say, well, I see this stream here in the middle, how far is that? And how relevant is that to some of your questions? But then we do go out and take a look at the pesticide mixing and loading facilities and go through the questions associated with that to verify that. So again, I use the map and the site visit to discuss any site-specific items. Obviously, no two vineyards are alike. No two growers do the same practices, so there's a lot of specific things that come up. And then we discuss each section of the workbook. And I tend to go through every single question in the workbook with an emphasis on those that, I have a question about what the score is and why you put that score. And, I'll ask you to describe, exactly what it is you do on that point. Okay. So this is what I bring to me for the inspections. And I print these out, have them in a notebook, and I make notes on these, and I pay attention to the scores, and I circle the ones you can see down at the bottom where I've changed a 4 to a 2. So it might be the case that you think you're doing a 4, but I think you're doing a 2, and we discuss that, and it might change the score. And then I'll go back to the thing you submitted, and then at the end of the process, and change those scores. All right, so what happens at the end of this is then we come up with a post-inspection report. The first part of that is one that I call documentation of practices. That's about whatever records you've shown me, so vineyard map, nutrient records, pesticide application records, if you've done any petiole soil analysis, scouting. Do you have a soil conservation plan with the local soil and water conservation district? Your storage and mixing and loading, and then worker training records. So on the sheet on the right, then that's the notes that I write and come up with as a result of the inspection. So this is one of the major sections, so you can see there's lots of things there, but each individual question in the score is listed there in my report, and then whatever comments seem appropriate. Incidentally, I'd like to encourage you to put your questions in the chat bar or in the Q&A section, because I'm sure this is going to provoke some questions. So feel free to put those in at any time. Okay, so finally, then, what are the resources that you can use to take a look at your practices and with respect to sustainability? Well, the first one I've already mentioned. We have this pre-inspection checklist that we use, to get you ready for the inspection. So the second thing is something I put together about Google Earth. I love Google Earth as a tool because there's lots of stuff you can do with it, and you can certainly put a lot of information in there. And this tells you exactly how to do it, how to zoom into your spot, how to draw the block boundaries, and how to get the information about acreage and other items that might be relevant. So this is something that it's really easy for you to do with your own computers, in the event that you don't already have a good vineyard map. Okay, and finally, one of the things the foundation asked me to do during the pilot program was to put together a list of resources for learning about different practices. A couple things, I've already mentioned Google Earth Pro. There's another app called the Soil Web that will you can put on your phone that gives you the soil type right where you're standing. You can ask it for that. And one that's coming up that Terry Bates has been working on a lot with Western growers, and I think Hans is starting a project on, is the My Efficient Vineyard. So that's sort of a digital database where you can put in lots of information about your vineyard. So that's another one. And finally, pesticide record keeping. There are, DEC forms, but there's also a program that Cornell has called Track Grape, which is sort of a spreadsheet-based program for making pesticide records and putting them in a format for the DEC or the person who processes grapes. So that's just a few of the things that are resources. So I want to just close by saying, doing these inspections has been quite enjoyable for me. It's not like a cop coming in. It's more like a conversation between the two of us. I try and judge things by the way they're written in the workbook, and be fair about the ratings I go. And as Justin mentioned, a lot of you are doing the right things. If we look at greenhouse gases and the things that they mentioned for row crop growers, well, the two things they can do to reduce, the three things they can do to reduce greenhouse gas emissions are: number one, no tillage; number two, reduce their nitrogen use application; and number three, have cover crops. Well, as I mentioned, our vinifera vineyards, many of them here in the Finger Lakes, there's no nitrogen applied, no tillage except for hilling up. And then we've had cover crops in the Finger Lakes and most of our vineyards in the rural middles, since the mid '80s at least. So that's very encouraging that our growers are doing a lot already to minimize greenhouse gas emissions. So I'm going to turn it back to you again, Justin. So thank you all, and great to see everybody again. And I look forward to doing more inspections next spring.
Thank you, Tim. Yeah, I'd like to point out that all these great resources Tim has shared, there's a list of them available on the New York Wine and Grape Foundation's website under the Sustainability tab, in case you're looking for them. If there are any questions, please put them in the chat or the Q&A, and we have time, we'll definitely answer those. Or Sam, if you have anything to say.
Looks like Cameron Hosmer has a question first, but I know Hans had put a question in the chat, and I just wanted to follow up on that too. But let's go with Cameron first.
Yeah.
Cameron, I did set your thing up so you should be able to talk.
Oh, no, I don't have a question. I just messed up. Hello? You still there?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry about that.
Oh, you're good.
So, well, if you weren't all paying attention to the Q&A function in this, Hans asked a question if New York wineries had been asked if they would actually pay more for sustainably produced grapes. And I think that the straight answer on that is no, there hasn't been any kind of formal survey of wineries whether they would in fact pay more for the grapes. We did do a business plan a couple years ago before we launched the pilot program this spring, and there was some qualitative interviews done by the team that prepared the business plan. And I think we are mainly moving forward on the backing of the consumer research that there is a growing demand for these products. And then I'll just point out that there is this public policy imperative as well, that grapevines are a perennial plant and they have the potential to sequester carbon. So we're viewed as a solution to the climate crisis that the state views as an important thing to address. But it is a little bit of the chicken and the egg. What's going to come first? the demand or producing the grapes. And I would say that we do need to push into helping all of you get certified. It's voluntary to participate, but many of you are probably, very likely to pass vine balance. And I know many of you participated in the pilot program this year and passed. So, this is just a means to recognize the good practices that you're already doing, and then hopefully being able to leverage that as a marketing point. And this is where, I think the marketing aspect of the program is really important. And that's where we're going to be dedicating more resources, is to invest in building a demand for these products and help position and tell the story of what makes a sustainable New York wine unique and special, and, what you're doing to protect the environment. So, admittedly, yeah, again, it's a chicken and egg kind of thing, but, I would say it's a business imperative that we get this going. And the first thing we really need to do is help you all get certified and recognized for what you're already doing well.
I'm going to jump to Tina, who asked if there will be fees at all in this program going forward. So short answer, we don't know, but to be certified for 2023, it'll be entirely free. Perhaps a couple years down the road, fees may be introduced, but we want to try and keep this as cheap for growers as possible, and we're doing our best to subsidize it. And then Amy asked if it's good to have two certifications. You are already certified by the Long Island Sustainable Wine Growing. So currently, we are a separate entity from the Long Island Sustainable Wine Growing, but hopefully in the future, we plan on trying to merge the two organizations together. So if you already are certified by Long Island Sustainable wine industry, that's completely separate from us. So if you get certified under us, you kind of get access to more of our marketing, which will be directed at New York Sustainable Wine Growing. And so I would recommend it, because if you are already certified under Long Island Sustainable Wine, you probably are already ready to go for our certification, and you just get the benefit of the marketing that we have going behind that trust mark and certification.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in here and say I did 2 Long Island wineries last year in the pilot program. So.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well,
not to make light of this, but if you look this up, Partnerships for Climate Smart Commodities, it's a USDA initiative to support agricultural products that can be part of the solution to climate change. And we submitted a $4 million request to support the sustainability program over the next 5 years. So if we are successful in getting that grant, then Tina, we're able to probably suspend charging any fees for a couple of years. Not that there's any plan to charge a fee yet, but that would help. And then to Amy, to your point, part of the proposal that we submitted to USDA is merging the two programs. So if we're successful in getting that grant, it's going to really help accelerate the program. If not, we're probably going to we'll be like, what about Bob, taking some baby steps till we get to the bigger goal. But so if you have a religion, please send your prayers that we're successful in getting that grant.
Yes. So if you were inspected under the pilot program in 2022, you will need to be re-inspected this year. So that was the pilot program. So you're not officially certified, but if you did the pilot program, it should be really easy. Just reapply, refill out vine balance with any action plans needed. Tim will swing by, probably look at you, be like, I remember you from last year. You're good to go. So yeah. And to clarify, I forgot to mention this in the presentation, but we have had questions in the past. This certification is proactive. So essentially, we're certifying you early in 2023 for the 2023 growing season and onward. We're not certifying you for the years in the past. So when you're certified in 2023, all the grapes grown beginning in the 2023 season will be certified, and none in the 2022 season.
All right. Well, Justin and Tim, Sam, actually, before I get going, any parting words?
Sure. No, I look forward to again doing this, and this is the first I learned that the people that did it with the pilot program would have to do it again. So if I get to revisit you again, I look forward to that. And this has been a very enjoyable thing for me to do, and I'm really gratified to see the program progress from where we started out in 2007 with the Vine Balance Workbook. That was just about taking a look at your practices, but in developing action plans. But I also want to encourage those of you who are doing this to really make connections with your local soil and water conservation district. There's a couple places where in some counties they've provided cost sharing for upgrading your pesticide and mixing and loading facilities, and doing other practices, particularly around soil conservation. So I think that's a good partner, and I hope that some of them can come and do a webinar at some point.
I believe we have one planned for early December.
Yeah. Yep. So thank you. And thanks, Justin, for inviting me.
And I would just say thanks for everyone for participating today. Justin can answer any of the questions that you have. And I'll just repeat that this is completely voluntary, and our goal is to recognize what you're already doing well and begin to build a category for sustainably produced wines from New York, and help all the boats rise with the initiative of this program.